I'm very excited to be here. I'm a trained nutrition scientist and registered dietitian, so my interests generally lie in the area of health and nutrition, but my interests also lie in translating that work to the consumer to drive utilization from the consumer. And I think there are a lot of things happening right now where the consumer is engaged, not only on the health side, but the sustainability side. It's a common thread that we've seen throughout the day. So going through my SWOT analysis, I'm actually going to take a bit of a shotgun approach and go through my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So to start off with some of the strengths that we see in the world of science, in the literature, and it's translating to the consumer, probably one of the largest macro trends that we're seeing right now that is driving utilization of pulses is this quest for protein. So protein, in terms of consumer trends and the trends being utilized by the food industry to drive innovation, protein has been around for about 10 or 11 years, and it doesn't show any sign of slowing down. Protein's a little bit different from fat and carbohydrate, in which the consumer has a love-hate relationship with, depending on, I don't know, every 3 or 4 years, they seem to change what they think about those macronutrients. Protein is a little bit different. The consumer loves protein, and it's not because the science is saying anything new. It's not because dietary guidelines are saying anything new. It's because they've developed their own perception and belief systems around protein and what it does for them. So it could be weight management, satiety. It could be muscle protein synthesis after exercise. It can be just energy. The consumer believes that protein gives them more energy. We think about protein and pulses, obviously a great fit, but the other macro trend that's happening at the same time that is driving utilization of pulses, and it is an obvious strength, is this idea around plant-based. And together, this idea around plant-based protein is very exciting for the industry, and it is driving utilization and driving curiosity from the food industry. Why plant-based? Well, in the news and the media from 50,000 feet, it's a healthier choice. The scientific literature is showing linkages with cardiometabolic risk factors like cholesterol levels, risk of cardiovascular disease, risk of diabetes, and obviously the effects on climate change. So when you have protein, the consumer wants protein, the consumer wants plant-based. The utilization of pulse-based ingredients and whole pulses in food innovation is going to drive utilization. In fact, Beyond Meat, I read an article yesterday, and Beyond Meat at the beginning of this year was projecting, in 2019 showed growth of 275%. At the beginning of this year, the projected revenue was about $700 million. At the end of the year, it's projected to be about $1 billion. So no sign of slowing down, a very strong trend. The free-from trend, non-GMO. Consumers have developed their own perceptions, as we talked about earlier today, around non-GMO and free-from. Obviously, a very strong driver for utilization, and it is in some ways driving the movement away from soy and many processed food ingredients because industry stakeholders want to label non-GMO and leverage that in communication with the consumer. Health, always a major driver. We look at major drivers for purchase behavior, taste, cost, health, sustainability. But health is always up there, and pulses are an inherently healthy food. Communicated in dietary guidelines all around the world, including Canada. Not only protein, good carbohydrates, vitamins and minerals. There's a trend right now with good carbs and bad carbs, low glycemic index, low glycemic response. Pulses tick so many boxes on the health side. I'm going to jump to sustainability, and it's already been touched upon with plant-based, but just this idea around climate change has transitioned from a threat to the way it's being depicted in the media, and I'm not here to say, where I lie or how it should be depicted, but it's now reaching global crisis. Whether or not that's hyperbole or not, it is a strength in the sense that plant-based protein is depicted to be a more sustainable source of food for the population. And then lastly, major strength in Canada, Canadian infrastructure. We're seeing massive investments in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan for processing of pulse-based ingredients to drive utilization by industry. And the fact that stakeholders are coming to Canada to process our pulses is just is a major strength and shows no sign of slowing down in the future. Some of the weaknesses are very much so linked to some of our strengths. So pulses are a great source of protein, but when we compare pulse protein to, say, soy protein or animal-based protein, it is of a lower quality. And that does present challenges for industry and utilization, because to make protein claims and to talk about protein to the consumer in North America, our regulatory frameworks dictate that you have to consider the quality of the protein. And metrics of quality and measures of quality are embedded into our regulations, and there are rules around how you communicate that out. And if you don't meet a threshold for quality, you cannot indicate that your food is a source of protein to the consumer, not only on pack, but also in advertising. So the default is that if you want to stay plant-based, you're going to move to soy, which is a better plant-based protein than most pulses. Taste as a perception is a weakness. Pulses are perceived to not be as tasty as animal-based protein, and I think that's not necessarily true. I think that's coupled with the fact that we have generally low consumption of pulses within North America. And then most of our health research, even though we're using ingredients to drive growth in the sector, most of our research around health is really focused on ingredients. It's focused on whole pulses and not ingredients. So while the ingredient manufacturers may want some messaging around health, we're not generating the data. We don't have the data to support those messages. Cost. Some of these newer foods utilizing pulse ingredients, like the new meat analogs, do cost substantially more in some cases than the animal-based product. But that seems to be changing. So I read an article a few days ago, Beyond Meat, and another company called Live Kindly is looking to dramatically lower the cost of their meat analog products to the consumer. And then communicating sustainability. I think as a weakness, there's a lack of communication in general. And there's a lack of data and robust tools to tell Canada's sustainability story. And I think that is something that we need to address, as sustainability, I think, is going to become more top of mind as a macro trend moving forward. And then the question is, just even more broadly, is it plant-based or is it pulses? Do the consumers care about pulses or do they care about plant-based? And I think that's something that we need to reconcile and how we're going to communicate moving forward. Some of the opportunities, obviously, with all of the new infrastructure moving into Canada, the pull from consumers, the pull from industry, the desire to use pulse ingredients, new food platforms, and the normalization of the integration of pulse ingredients into food. So there's a number of opportunities, obviously with meat analogs, blending pulse ingredients with animal-based protein to reduce cost, to improve the sustainability profile, to improve the health profile of these foods, beverages and dairy alternatives, breakfast cereals, breads, bakery. I think there's a tremendous opportunity perhaps for industrial utilizations of some of the byproducts from pulse ingredient fractionation, like compostable plastics, for example. And something a little bit, as a home brewer, something a little bit more dear to my heart, I think there's a tremendous opportunity in Canada in the craft beer and the spirit industry with some of the, perhaps the starches coming off of pulse fractionation. I was in Texas last year, and there was a farmer in Texas who was growing pinto beans. And him and his brother bought an old distillery, and he made pinto bean vodka. And he said he's never seen anything ferment so violently in his entire life, that the fermenters were shaking. But anyway, I wrangled a bottle from him. So anyway, I think it's a growing opportunity, even in Saskatchewan with Rebellion Brewery and their lentil cream ale. Sorry, I lost my place. Sorry. As another opportunity, on the protein side, there seems to be upcoming changes to our regulatory framework around protein claims in Canada. So the government of Canada is aware that the regulatory environment is prohibiting the utilization and growth of the sector, especially when we have superclusters like Protein Industries Canada that is really based on pulse protein and fractionation. We don't have a regulatory framework that is allowing utilization. So I have been told that there are regulatory changes coming just some of the work in the area that Pulse Canada has spearheaded to inform the change. We worked with the University of Toronto and the University of Manitoba to do a protein risk assessment of the Canadian diet, to see how Canadians are consuming protein. Are they consuming enough protein of enough quality? And it seems to be not looking dire, so it's actually going to probably be helpful in informing that regulatory change moving forward. In terms of an opportunity in agriculture and communicating sustainability, I think that as an opportunity, and it was touched upon this morning, consumers do want to feel connected to food and the story behind the food. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity to use dynamic storytelling and messaging and having Canadian farmers tell the story. And I think it will resonate with Canadians and consumers. The question is, how do you do it? Like, what are you comparing yourself to? Do you want to compare? Is it on pack? Is it videos? And I think those are things that we need to wrestle with and talk about. But I think it can be done. And I was telling a few of you guys yesterday, I was telling you, Mac, I'll tell the story. I was online the other day, and I don't know why, but I stumbled across a page for jeans. And it was a company in the States who make jeans, and they're sourcing cotton from the U.S. And I'm on this site, and I'm watching this video, and these farmers are telling the story about how they make their cotton, and they use crop rotations and precision agriculture, and, you know, it's for the future. Man, I was like, where do I buy these jeans? Like, I want to wear these jeans so I could go out and tell the story about these jeans. So, you know, we have a great story to tell in the pulse industry, and if you can tell this great story about jeans, oh my God, with what there's so much that we could do. I think there's an opportunity to further research and leverage the effect of pulses and dietary patterns on cardiometabolic risk. We talk a lot about sustainability because it's very sexy, and I'm not taking anything away from that. I'm extremely interested in it. But when we look at right now what is driving consumption, like I said, health and what's in it for the consumer is a little bit more top of mind right now. And I think it might just be that we haven't sorted out how to communicate that sustainability message. We just don't have that data right now in place. Some of the threats, very, very quickly, some of the new processed food products. There is talk in the media and amongst scientists that sodium levels, saturated fat levels, incomplete protein, and we don't know the effects on dietary patterns. Are these newer foods unhealthy? Are they contributing to healthy dietary patterns? When we talk about plant-based, is this the way that we're really talking about plant-based from a scientific and health perspective? Or is industry doing something that is more on trend, that is aligned from a distance but not really aligned up close? And this is sort of linked to this whole notion around ultra-processed and the effects of ultra-processed foods, which I don't really subscribe to. I personally hate that term. As we move to animal and plant-based blends, a tremendous opportunity, but the question is, does this elicit consumer confusion? The adoption of plant-based diets and utilization of plant-based protein, while we talk about the environment, is largely driven, I think, Deborah, you talked about this a little bit this morning, animal welfare is top of mind. So is it the right driver to use for some consumers? I think I'm going to stop there, but thank you very much for your time, and happy to answer any questions.